So, props. And I'm going to use this microphone down here. Is it on? Good. I'm Lisa Tresch, and I'm the director of, no, I'm sorry, I am not the director of Rising Village Foundation. I am the founder of Rising Village Foundation. We have a new executive director, and so I'm sorry, I'm supposed to say founder. That's a little hard, isn't it, Denise? So we work with immigrants and refugees, but I'm gonna have to go back a ways and start way before that, because we haven't always worked with immigrants and refugees. That's not where Rising Village Foundation started. So I was a magazine editor who was minding my own business and volunteering with my husband's nonprofit. And so that was actually an international adoption agency. And so what I was doing is I was going around to different churches and I was talking to them about the orphan crisis and about how many children in specific countries were without families and what we could do about that and what we could learn about that. And so I went to a meeting one day at Dillon International and just thought, well, I'll just go learn a little bit more about what's going on in Ghana. So the representative that worked with the agency from Ghana was there. And on the table in front of him, he had a whole bunch of pictures of little boys and girls, mostly boys, in Ghana who were in the orphanage. And so I had a whole bunch of questions because basically he said these are not orphans who their parents have died. These are kids that are in and out of the orphanage. And so being a former journalist, I peppered him with a whole bunch of questions. And he finally said, "You should just come to Ghana." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I did. So I dragged my college-age daughter with me, and we went over to Ghana. And he had an NGO that worked in Ghana. He didn't just do the adoption stuff, he also had an NGO. And so I went, and I started to realize that I have an adopted daughter from China. And so I just assumed that it worked the same way in all countries, that they were all little bitty babies, and their parents were no longer able to take care of them, and so, or that they had died. And so I just assumed that's the way it worked. But these were children that were older, and they mostly had single moms. And their mothers would take them to the orphanage when times were really, really hard, which was most of the time, and leave them there for a little while until they could get enough funds to come get them and take them out of the orphanage and continue to raise them until times got hard again, and then they would send them back to the orphanage. And so I realized that while these are orphans, they're not really orphans. They're children that have single mothers that are struggling to take care of them. So I worked with Peter's organization for about a year and a half, learning basically everything that I might not want to do if I had a nonprofit. No criticism, but I just learned that it's more difficult than it seems to work cross-culturally. So we began to look at what can we do on the front end of this to help these moms. So I told Peter, I said, I think that I keep seeing all of these women that are sewing. Is there any way that we could help some of these women that are sewing? And he kind of liked the idea, but then he also didn't like the idea because he had a specific thing that he was doing, which was great. So I said, well, what if I just like maybe brought some things over and see if they could make some things that we could take back to the US and sell. And so he thought that would be fine. And so we did that. And somewhere along the way, I got this really crazy idea that, well, you know, I could start this nonprofit in the US, and we have a lot of people here with resources. And so we could sell these products And maybe what we could help them do is have some financial success so that they didn't have to take their kids back and forth to the orphanage. And so that worked out okay. I came back and I hounded people to buy things. And this little bag was one of the first things that we sold, and we called it the Ankase bag because the village that we were working in was Ankase village in Ghana. And so we came back and I just carried these around and asked my friends to buy them because I have really nice friends. So I realized that what happens in Ghana is they have apprenticeships. And so for the women in Ghana, if they can afford to enter an apprenticeship in either hairstyling or sewing, it's a 3-year program. And at the end of it, they get a certificate from the government that basically allows them to set up a little shop in front of their wherever, but most of them set it up in front of their house, just a table, and they're in business. So I said, well, because I have all of these really nice friends at home, maybe we could fund some women to enter this apprenticeship because it does cost money, and that was the big barrier for many of these single moms. And so Peter kind of liked the idea, but then he also didn't really like the idea because he had his thing that he was doing. So along the way, we had brought in a young man named Isaac who lived in Ankase and who had a great big heart, and his dad was the pastor of the Methodist Church. And he had always dreamed of finding some way to help the people in his village who were struggling. So he came to work with us. And as time went by, Isaac and I began to really think about what would it look like if we just had an NGO in Ghana that was for funding the women to enter these apprenticeships. And so after a period of time, it just worked out that we left working with Peter and we began an NGO in Ghana with a corresponding nonprofit here in the US. So somebody had mentioned that starting a nonprofit is not easy, and back then it was a whole lot harder. That was not almost 10 years ago. So we launched out and we did that, and we started the nonprofit, and we began to bring back more of these bags, and we started to bring back things like aprons and headbands, and you know, you've seen all of that stuff that people go around to craft fairs and they sell, and so that's what we did. We continued to sell the items of the single moms, and we opened a shop on 11th Street to sell these items. So it was going really well, but you know, I will tell you that working cross-culturally is very difficult if you're somebody that you're not from that country, you're not familiar with that country, but if you don't live in that country. And so I began to think, you know, I think somewhere along the way we need to be able to turn this program, the whole thing, over to the people in Ghana, because by that time we had 8 staff in Ghana and we were working in 3 different regions of Ghana. So it had grown pretty big, and I felt like it was probably time for us to turn that over to the Ghanaians and come back and not shut down the program here, but just to sit and wait and see what God might do to open a door here in Tulsa. So I'm not a patient person and I don't wait very well, but really there was nothing. I wasn't going to come home and force anything. The program that we were doing, I couldn't really replicate here. So I just kind of hung around and bided my time, and a friend invited me to help her with an ESL teaching class that she was doing. And most of the people in that class were Burmese. So I said, sure, I'll help with that. I've never taught ESL and I have no idea what I'm doing, but sure, I'll do that. So I stumbled my way through that, still looking around, still waiting to see if God was going to open any doors for Rising Village. And I thought, well, you know, I'm working with all of these Burmese people. I should probably have some idea about the culture and the country. So one of the ladies that was kind of heading up helping to head up the classes was Burmese, and so I said, can we go to lunch? And she said, sure. So we went to lunch at Brahms and had a really nice time talking, and she really filled me in on what life is like for the Burmese here and what life is like back there and why they're here and how many of them are here, and taught me a couple of phrases that I cannot repeat because I don't remember them. But anyway, we had a great lunch and we were wrapping it up, and she said, well, tell me a little bit about what you do. And I thought, well, what do I do right now? I don't actually do anything right now. I said, well, Rising Village is kind of in this in-between place, but here's what we used to do and what they're still doing back in Ghana with the NGO. And I said, we teach women. I told her about the whole apprentice thing. And I said, most of the women are seamstresses. They want to learn how to sew. And she leaned over the table and she said, sew? And I said, yeah, sew. And she said, we have so many women who are sitting there in their apartments right now with nothing to do, and they know how to sew a little bit, but they don't know how to use a sewing machine. And I said, really? And she said, yes. And then she sat there for a minute and she said, you know what? We can do here what you were doing in Ghana. And I thought, okay, is this like the door that's opening? And I looked across at her, and I mean, she was just like, we are doing this. And so we did. Her name is Loon, Fung Loon. And in 6 weeks, we had a sewing program. And we had 30 women on the waiting list and a class of 24 that we had to split into 2 classes. So I thought, well, yeah, I guess this is what we're gonna do. So that was 4 years ago, and we have had over 200 women go through the program. Yay. And that is with COVID, and we had to stop our program during COVID. We had to stop our classes during COVID. So here's a funny thing, I don't sew. And this is when I think God has a big sense of humor, because when I was in 6th grade, I took home ec, and my mother was a seamstress, and so she made all of my clothes until 7th grade, until I told her that I didn't want her to make my clothes anymore, because everybody noticed that she made my clothes. So, not all of them, but you know, enough that I was embarrassed. So I did take a home ec class, and the only thing I have to show for it is a scar where I was trying to make a buttonhole and I stabbed them. So I am not a seamstress. So it's, you know, it's amazing to me that God can't. I think if He gave us, you know, the vision of knowing what was ahead, there are those of us like me that would run the other direction and say, I can't do that. When He knows all along, you can do that. You can't do it without me, but you're going to be able to do this. So if I had any idea that I was going to start a nonprofit as somebody who doesn't sew, who had never been to Ghana, who is terrible at learning other languages, I would have run the other direction. But He just lays it out little by little, the next step and the next step. So we always, even after we closed the shop, we always continued to sell these bags. And so in our sewing classes, we decided, well, we can have these women make some products that we can sell, and the income will go back to the women. So this is a theme here. This is where you come in. So I'm just going to show you a few of the products that they actually have for sale right now. And then I'll take all those. And then actually these right here I'm going to tell you about in just a minute. So what they do is, because people are so good. I mean, when you ask people, oh, good, thank you. When you ask people to help, it's amazing to me. You think nobody's gonna, no, we're not gonna get. Maybe it's just me. I'm always sort of this won't work. But we have so many people that donate fabric. It's unbelievable how many of you sew? So this is something that I didn't know, that people that sew actually also hoard fabric. And so if you ask for donations, it like clicks in this little place of guilt, like, oh, I've got all this fabric and I'm never gonna use it, and I should give some fabric to that nonprofit. So we have tons of fabric, and so what they do is they take this upcycled fabric, and they take this fabric and they make these upcycled products, which is what we call them. And so we choose like really good fabric. I mean, we don't take fabric that is like been in grandma's basement for 20 years. So they make these products, they make pillows, and these are all for sale, risingvillage.org/store, I think. But anyway, it's on there. So pillows, the apron that Shannon is wearing, and this little bag here. And then I also wanted to show you this, and these right now are these are kind of like you have to ask for them. They're not on the website anymore. But so one of the ladies in the program came up with this design. So it's a dog food bag on the inside, and then our fabric, our donated fabric. So like you can, thank you. And so you take it to the grocery store, and if you're getting your milk and all that, and it's just then you can wipe it out. It's all grungy on the inside. Easy to clean. But we used to sell these on the website, but the women clean out the bags, and so this is like a product that they actually don't want to make a lot of them. So now it's like a special thing. If it's a secret, actually, so you guys know of what other people don't know. But if you want one, you can get in touch with me. So same thing with this one. Inside is a dog food bag, and then these are the rice bags that the Burmese women buy their rice in bulk. And so I think they get it at like Sam's or Costco. But anyway, yeah. So that is the favorite bag. So the favorite bag that nobody can really buy anymore. But I love that because it was actually the women kind of taking ownership of okay, let's design the product. So now the women actually design the products, which is awesome. So anyway, because I'm a better writer than a speaker, I wrote a book about this nonprofit. And it was a good cleansing thing for me because I was getting ready to step out. Honestly, I had a big burnout, and I decided that there was somebody better to do this whole thing than me, and I would step back and I would just be the founder that could go and do things like this. So when COVID happened, we had to stop our classes, obviously. And we said we've still got to be able to help these women. They're struggling more now than they were. And like I said, most of the women are Burmese, but we have women from all over the world. So we said, what are we going to do during this time that we can't have classes? One of our instructors was at Hobby Lobby, and there was a male nurse there, that was trying to figure out they had run out of masks at his clinic, and was trying to figure out how to just fashion a mask from, like different things at Hobby Lobby that they might have that he could stitch together or glue, and it was kind of pitiful, and she was just standing there watching him struggle with how can I make a mask? And so she called me and she said, do you think that maybe the women could make masks? And I said, yeah, I think the women could make masks. So the women made masks. And because I'm terrible with remembering numbers, we started in March, the last week of March, making masks. And we mobilized 8 was either 8 or 10 women to make masks. By April 12th, the women had made over 1,500 masks. Yeah, so that was not, we stopped in July, so I don't have a count of how many, but I think it was well over 2,000 masks. So we gave them away first because you remember at that time it was just really, really bad in hospitals and clinics. These were not masks for the doctors. These were masks for the the workers, the staff. But then we began to sell them so that the women could have income, and so we had them on our website. So I was just drowning in masks. I mean, I was hauling them because we had to, we would take them and pick up the fabric and then pick up the finished masks, and we were, so, and can you believe I don't have one mask to show you. But they looked great. I mean, they were made from the donated fabric and they were really cute, and the women picked out, like at 4th of July, they had, fireworks masks. So anyway, it was wonderful. At the end of it, I decided, you know what, I'm going to turn this program over, and it is going so well. They have a conversation. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like I need to hold this. I feel like if I had stayed, it couldn't be soaring the way that it is now. So I'm so thankful. Our executive director is Eric Costanzo. He has such a heart for refugees, and I do too, but he has he's much more, anyway, he's just able to get things done that I couldn't get done. So it's wonderful. I mean, we have a conversation cafe that meets on Monday night, and we have a really big exciting thing getting ready to happen that I can't tell you about. Isn't that so unfair? But I'm sorry that you'll hear about it, and it's very, very exciting. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read this. Can I just read this epilogue to my book? And I know that's going to read, but I just want to come full circle. So, and I'm still wearing this bag. On a breezy Tuesday night in February 2022, I arrived at CarePoint, which is where we have our classes, to drive 5 Afghan women home from sewing class. Since my transition from executive director, I now considered myself a volunteer and was eager to help whenever possible. The women were part of a large group of Afghan refugees who escaped the country beginning in August 2021 after a revitalized Taliban took control of Kabul. Many Afghans fled, including 19 women who attend Rise sewing class on Monday evenings. As the women walked to my car, I could see they were carrying bags they had made in class that evening, and I recognized the pattern, the Unkase bag. This was the first project our apprentices in Ghana learned to sew for income, and had always been the final project in our Rise Sewing Basics class. As I watched the women climb into my car, the bags either folded in their arms or slung across their shoulder, I wanted to explain everything about that bag. The first women who had made it, how we filled suitcases with the bags to bring back from Ghana, my college roommate who designed the bag. We had a language barrier, so I sat for a minute and thought about how to explain this beautiful full circle. These bags, I said, pointing at one, and the women looked at me expectantly. But the story was too long and our languages were too different, so I simply said, I love them. They held up their bags and nodded in agreement, smiling at me. Those bags aren't going to change the world, but for a group of women in the Monday night sewing basics class, they represent a welcoming open door and a desire by one group of people to hold out their hands to another group of people. We'll keep doing this, and together we'll make a small movement of change that just might leave the world a little better than we found it. So I want to tell you that the overarching thing that we want to do with the refugees and the immigrants in our program is to say welcome. Because I think so often we forget that welcome is like the most beautiful word. If you're thinking about people who have come from war-torn countries, places that they had to flee, and they're coming to a country that they don't know the language and they don't understand our weird, strange customs and culture. If we can just say welcome and then take them by the hand and do that one small thing. The title of my book is Move the Needle, because I'm somebody that likes to do a really big thing and make a big splash. But what I realized is that big things are made up of little things that you do along the way. So thank you so much, Denny. And I want to say that Denny opened up, during COVID, we needed some of our people to get in and get a vaccine, and she was just instrumental in having that happen. So anyway, thank you all so much.